orchestra player, then we have to act like an orchestra player. Like we have to practice this way. Like maybe put off. I know there's some auditions coming down the road. It's like maybe put off the recital. Like put off that type of training. I really do. I rarely call practicing. I call it like training. Like what are we training for? I'm trying to use language that's as specific as possible, so that I can be as honest as possible with myself about like what am I training for.
This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Chris Smith. Chris, well, he's a man of action. After an 8-year tour of duty with the President's own United States Marine Corps band and an 11-year run with the Orchestre Symphonique de Montreal, Chris is currently the principal trumpet for the San Diego Symphony Orchestra. An avid athlete, Chris takes a sport-specific training approach to trumpet practice and a Hall of Fame coach's mentality to winning auditions. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. All right, welcome to another fantastic edition of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I am hanging with Mr. Chris Smith. Chris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Jose, so much. So great to be here. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the invitation to be with you and your listeners and viewers. So let's hang.
All right, yeah, absolutely. When we were doing our little chat as we were getting everything set up, you were saying that a hurricane is coming through your area. So let's hope that we can get through this before anything else happens.
The rolling blackouts won't start for several hours, so I think we're going to have electricity and everything happening here. So this tropical storm K, I think, hit Baja California yesterday, and I believe is supposed to be coming up the coast. But it's 7 a.m. here in San Diego, and it's already 86 degrees and feels like 100% humidity. So, this is like, not a normal thing here in San Diego. Usually it's not exactly 86 degrees. Usually it's very nice, like 76, not a ton of humidity. So everybody here is just like, this feels like Washington, D.C., where I lived for 8 years.
Oh, man. Yeah, wait, so you've done both coasts.
Oh, yeah. People here complain, they're like, oh, it's so hot. It's like 86 degrees. I'm like, you have no idea what people on the East Coast are dealing with, and especially with the humidity and everything. So it kind of cracks me up when I listen to.
Yeah. And then you talk to the people down in Orlando and Miami, and
yeah, exactly. So I always tell, we've been playing outside at our outdoor venue here called the Shell, and musicians will be complaining about the heat or whatever, and I'm thinking, I used to march around in a wool uniform in Arlington Cemetery when it was like, 90 degrees with 90% humidity. 76 and like, 50% humidity is not that bad, actually, guys.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate not only first your service with the military band, but we appreciate your service with having to tolerate the beautiful weather out there in San Diego.
Doing our best here. Always, we strive for excellence, so we're doing our best. So.
You got to suck it up sometimes.
Yeah.
So actually, it's interesting. You're talking about like being in DC and making that you've gone around. You were in DC, you were in Montreal for a bit as well. Now finally have kind of settled down in San Diego. Making that transition from the military band world into the orchestral world, what was that like for you? I mean, I know that each of them has their own advantages and disadvantages, but where there's like major kind of shifts you had to make in your approach to your performance and your playing.
Yeah. Well, I think it would probably, if we just go back maybe a little bit, the short answer to your question is it was painful. But I think to give maybe a little bit greater scope, if we think about like my when I was going through, undergrad and I started a master's degree at the Eastman School, my goal was to, have a full-time playing job. And I achieved that, literally I won the job in the Marine Band on my 24th birthday. And I thought, man, I'm done. like I am thrilled, and I genuinely was thrilled. I didn't think that I was going to do anything else. I thought I'm going to play in the Marine Band for 30 years and retire, and that was going to be it. Um, and so after 4 years of playing in the band, um, I'd been promoted, I think, like right at the end of that 4 years. So I'd been promoted to a gunnery sergeant, and the unique thing about, or one of the great things about the band, I do think it is unique also, that with the Marine Band, is that we're doing ceremonial work, we're doing concerts, we're playing like lots of brass quintet stuff, we're playing at the White House, there's a chamber orchestra, so there's a jazz band, I mean, there's like lots of different outlets, and I was very comfortable there, because that had kind of been my college experience. Was like, I played in brass quintets, I played in big bands, I played in vocal jazz band, I played in orchestras, I played in, I mean, my upbringing was really in band music, and so I felt very, very comfortable there. However, after 4 years, kind of realized, like, I kind of moved in to middle management's not the right word, because there's not really a management thing happening in the bands, but I started to feel like, is this it? Like is this what I'm going to really do for 30 years? And I had no concept of that previous. I just wanted a job and playing. And so, though I was grateful for that, the requirements of the band, I was just talking about this the other night with somebody, that you might go, a week or two, maybe even 3 weeks, with no real performances, maybe playing taps at a funeral, but that funeral, um, you may find out like that morning that, oh, this is for death of the first person killed in Afghan. I was in the military right around 2000, September 11th. I was in Washington D.C., and so I played taps for like the first CIA officer killed in Afghanistan, and I found out like that morning that all of the media outlets were going to be filming me playing taps, or filming the band, and me playing taps, and so the practice requirements were such that, like, I had to practice like all the time, but with no real knowledge of when I was going to be performing necessarily. And it kind of came to a point for me where I thought, um, if I'm going to practice this much and keep myself in this kind of shape, I'd like to perform more often. There are 20 trumpet players in the Marine Band, and at any given moment, they only need 8, basically. And so there, at that time when I was in there really wasn't enough work to sort of satisfy all 20 trumpet players. I shouldn't speak for other people, because I'm sure a lot of other people appreciated the workload, but the workload for me was underwhelming in terms of the performance opportunities, in relation to how much I felt I needed to practice. So, I started to look elsewhere, and we formed a brass quintet actually after about 4 years in. It was called the Valor Brass, and I'm not sure if they're still in existence. I should find out, because I think at least one of the guys has retired, Mike Mergen, who's now teaching at Cincinnati, good friend of mine. But so we started to like kind of create more opportunities, within the band, with the 5 of us, which I certainly appreciated. We've gone on some tours and things, but it was still like, I'm still practicing a lot, but I'm not performing enough. And I'd always kind of thought, like, I would like to play in an orchestra, but I hadn't really taken that many auditions, actually, and so I just thought, at that time I was doing a lot of triathlons. I was into Olympic triathlons, and I'd done a half Ironman triathlon and stuff, and I thought, again, I thought, man, if I put the amount of energy that I'm putting into training for these things into actual trumpet practicing, because at that time I was practicing a lot, but not like a lot, and I just thought, I think if I practiced a little bit more and maybe did a little less, running and swimming and biking, I might actually be able to kind of sort my way through an audition. And so the long story short is, I'd taken a couple of auditions. I'd played as well as I thought that I could possibly play. Had made the semifinals in like Atlanta, and then I came back. I was living in Baltimore at the time, and at that time, this is in like 2007, late 2007. I was good friends with Renee Shapiro in the Baltimore Symphony, and uh, I knew him outside of the trumpet. Actually, we like to hang out quite a bit, and so I went to him and I said, "Hey, man, I would like to maybe come play for you if that's okay." And which was weird because I can't. I didn't. We really didn't do the trumpet thing. We kind of did the hang part of the trumpet hang. We just did the hang part, and so I felt a little weird because I was like, I'm talking to a friend here, not like a trumpet player. And so, long story short, he got me prepped for the Montreal Symphony. Um, a weird thing happened. I was getting on the plane in Baltimore to fly up to Montreal, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And Renee, I look at my phone. He's calling me. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, this is kind of weird. And I pick up the phone. Hey man, is everything okay? And he said, hey, I just want to let you know, you're going to win this job. And when you get there, if they have you play with this section, like, don't play so loud. And so I was just like, yeah, like, whatever, dude. Like, thanks for the vote of confidence, and I appreciate it. No, you're gonna be, just do what we talked about, whatever. So get up there, take the audition, win the audition, and then I had like a real kind of choice to make. Was I'd had um, 8 years in the Marine Band at that point, and another two, and I'm like halfway to a pension. um, or do I sort of like get off of this track that I'm on and kind of do the orchestra thing, which, like I said, I had no real knowledge of. And by the way, I should mention, like, I won the fourth utility trumpet job in Montreal, and most of the people who knew me were very confused by the fourth trumpet aspect of that, because I wasn't really known as like a low note player. So I realize this is a very long way to answer your question, but when I transitioned from because in the Marine Band I was kind of trusted as like playing a lot of first cornet, a lot of first trumpet parts. They kind of knew that I was a strong player, so I would frequently, especially on ceremonial work, be like, trusted to be kind of just shouting out the melody all the time, as trumpet players are wont to do. But they knew that I had it in me to sit at the White House for 3 hours and just kind of like keep playing. And that didn't really include a lot of low notes. And so when I won this job, it was kind of confusing to everyone, including me, actually. And so so I move up to Montreal. My trial week was playing Heldenleben and a couple of other things. And so we all know the famous kind of like low thing, low parts, low excerpts in the B flat or the E flat part in Heldenleben, and so it was like a thrill for me to actually get to play those in context and not not just as an excerpt. And kind of sorted my way through the concert, had a lot of fun with the guys, and they offered me the job. And so I go up there, and I'm still like, I'm practicing as if I'm still playing high notes, and I get up there and realize, like, fairly quickly, like, I'm not playing out of the staff at all. I'm not even playing out of the middle of the staff. I mean, everything was like G and below. And so I was practicing, I had to revamp completely like how I was practicing, and my equipment and everything. Just one real quick story. I remember we were playing like a Berlioz one of these barn burning overtures, Corsair or something. And the one of the guys was like, "Hey man, so have you ever played this before?" And I said, "Yeah, but I know how the violin parts go, not the trumpet parts, because we'd played that like a million times in the Marine band, and as the cornets play all the violin parts and not the actual trumpet parts." So it was just kind of like a funny thing that all of a sudden I'm playing like music in the orchestra. It was like way easier than the music in the band, because like if you know cornet parts, particularly in the like premier bands, it's like the ask of the cornet section is uh it's a huge amount of lifting, chop wise and technique wise. And so for me to go from like playing these like lines in Corsair or something, to just going bop bop and then resting for 20 measures. It was like, what is happening here? This is not my experience on the trumpet for the last nearly decade of my life. So I'm playing all these low notes. I'm counting all these rests all the time, but I'm still practicing a lot. And you know, transitioning from somebody, Jack Suddy in Cleveland had said to me one time, the difference between like his impression, and I actually agree with this much later now, like his impression of the Marine band versus playing in an orchestra was like, we're all striving for excellent trumpet playing. But some people are sprinters and some people are marathon runners. And so he kind of equated the playing in a military band to being a marathon runner, because like the trumpet, the cornet's on your face for like 2 hours during a tour concert. Versus playing in the orchestra, which is like, well, the trumpet's on your face for 10, 20 measures at a time, and then you're kind of resting. And even though it's brutal, it can be brutal playing in an orchestra, the requirements are just different. And so that took some learning on my part, physically and otherwise, to sort of sit next to people who had a totally different sound concept than what I'd been used to hearing. And it's not better or worse, it's just different. And meaning playing in a band is very much blending, and not like necessarily hard articulations, particularly down the section where you have two or three people on a part, and so, and then moving into the orchestra world and going, okay, well, I'm playing fourth, but it's like principal fourth, and you got to like lead with the articulation and make sure the articulation fills the hall, and all of the things that go along with that. It's not a blending instrument. Trumpets in an orchestra are not a blending instrument most of the time. So just revamping my concept of physically how to do the job, mentally how I was conceptualizing how to do the job. And after a few months of this, and in my head I'm like, I need like bigger equipment. Like this is kind of not working. Kept going on to like bigger cups, and though I was getting like a quote unquote bigger sound, I was only able to play for like 10 minutes at a time, and felt like I was needing all this rest and everything. So when I say the transition between the two was painful, it literally was painful to the point where I felt like I was almost injuring myself, that I was trying to do my same like Marine band routine where the ask from the band might be show up at the White House and play for 3 hours. So I was always practicing in this manner of like, I got to have like kind of 3 hours worth of stamina here, versus playing in an orchestra where it's like you only need a minute of stamina at a time. And then couple that with like playing on larger and larger equipment, and but my practice sessions were staying the same, like really long practice sessions. I got to a point where I was like barely hanging on, and this is just like in year one of playing in an orchestra, and I thought, I've made a huge mistake here. Like I'm not sure I can actually do this. And Russ Devis, the associate principal in Montreal at the time, said to me, "Listen, you got to go see Phyllis Stork. Like, you're totally turned around here. I can't really help you, but you definitely need help." And so I went down to Phyllis and I said, "I'm putty in your hands. I know what I'm capable of doing. I know what I'm capable of sounding like, and right now I'm not capable of doing or sounding like what I think I'm able to do." And so we spent maybe 4 hours figuring out some equipment things, and she definitely sorted me out. And then I came back to the orchestra the next week, and it was like instantly better. And then I really started kind of like really digging into like how can I fix these practice problems that I'm in terms of like length of time and all this stuff. So I realized that was a very long answer to your question of like what was the transition. And it was painful. It was a painful transition because when you only know one thing and then you go to something else that's like totally different. It's like we kind of latch on to what we know, and I knew like long hours of practicing, playing lots of high notes all the time to kind of keep my chops kind of like hard, basically. And then doing this other thing, and playing low and just playing for very short periods of time, but brutally loud, like brutally loud compared to what I was doing in the Marine Band. And just different sound concept. It was jarring. And even though I sorted out the physical aspect of it, it did take, I would say, probably 2 full seasons with Montreal for me to finally kind of be able to just like sit down in the chair next to the associate principal and feel like when he took a breath, I knew what was going to come out of his bell, and I knew what was going to come out of my bell. And finally, after like 2 years, it finally felt comfortable to do that, to play second trumpet, to because that was in Montreal. The fourth utility was like they kind of paired the principal and the second together, and then the third associate principal and the fourth together. So I would kind of play like the second trumpet on like the first half of concerts, and then if there was something that had 4 trumpets or 2 trumpets, 2 cornets or whatever, then I would play fourth trumpet. So always like kind of at the bottom of the section there. So sorry, man, that was I didn't realize I was going to go for so long.
No, that's good stuff. Because there's so many interesting things that you talked about in concepts. I like the one that comes top of mind to me is we were talking about the difference between a marathon and a sprint.
Yeah.
And regardless of if you're in any physical endeavor, whether it be playing music, running, any of the other things. I have a very long background in martial arts training and teaching, and I always tell people that you have to understand what are the requirements of what you are training for, because to train for a marathon requires a different set of muscles and a different level of endurance and a different level of stamina than does the sprint. And when you practice one way expecting to get a different result, then you're setting yourself up for massive failure.
Right.
But
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, but it's also that mindset of being able to make that shift of the mental approach that you have to take when you're training, like you're saying, doing triathlons and stuff like that. That has a different level of mental activity that goes along with it as well.
Right. I think that one of the confusing things for looking back now, and if I were to be, teaching students like on a full-time basis, I think it's very confusing for students who, everybody's trying to get the best possible education, like trumpet education, right? But I see a lot of students, and I was one of them who was like, well, I want to be well-rounded, right? And I want to be, so like I said, I was playing lead in the second big band at Western Michigan and split lead in the top big band. I'm playing it, started a horn band for a vocal jazz group. I'm playing in a brass quintet. I'm playing in solo cornet in the band or whatever, and then I'm playing, in the orchestra, and playing recitals, right? Like and then my regular lessons of like etudes and other like sort of solo pieces. um and so we get this false sense of like, in order to play the trumpet, like we're trying to get, everybody's trying to get this well kind of like rounded education, but then I think it ends up being like totally skewed. And I think you had said like, being much more specific, or at least this is what I kind of took from what you were talking about, of being more like sport specific, of like, I would never play a recital right now in the middle of an orchestral season. It's just like those two requirements are totally different from one another, and actually interfere with one another. And so that was where the rub was with going from the Marine band to the orchestra, was that I was practicing for one thing, but being required to do something else. That because I was practicing for an endurance endeavor, I wasn't really, I'd had no power left over for the power event, meaning playing a Mahler symphony. And now I could basically, and I got away with it because I was playing low notes, and like it wasn't taxing myself, like I wasn't missing notes, but I definitely was tired, for most of that first season. And honestly, for a long time after that, it took a little while to sort of figure out how to practice to play in an orchestra, how to practice to take an orchestral audition. But that was very confusing. And then I realized, like, much later, why. And it's like I was training for one thing, but actually trying to do something else. And so for your listeners out there, I think the more that we can be very as specific as possible, even though we are training for like some unknowns, right? I mean, like we may, particularly freelance trumpet players, I mean, I have the privilege of knowing the repertoire we're going to play a year in advance, and actually have eyes on it. If it's online, I can get it. If it's a new piece or whatever, I have like at least 2 weeks to prepare, for our concerts here, in any orchestra that I've played in. But for people who are like, just getting a call, that have no time to necessarily prepare, it can be, I think a daunting experience to understand like how to practice for something. But I do believe that, like, so we have known things. I hate to use like a, for those of you who may remember, like a Donald Rumsfeld quote, like there are known knowns and there are known unknowns and there are unknown knowns and there are whatever. But like I think for most professional trumpet players, though there may be unknowns, there's still kind of like knowns within those unknowns. For instance, I'm probably not going to get called to go in and play lead trumpet on the next, The Incredibles 4, or, something like that's not of my concern. I don't need a double C to or beyond, to do my job, or to do any job that somebody would potentially call me for. So even though, like, as a trumpet player, like, man, I would love to have like this like screaming double C or whatever, that's just not like really in my lane of trumpet playing. But I might get called to go play in a studio and play for 3 or 4 hours, so like that, so there, even though those are unknowns in the future, like I can still plan for those in terms of like how I'm practicing, and like obviously like what my job requirement is, and then just the other things that I want to be doing, like, although I'm kind of done recording etudes now, but nonetheless, the idea of like, I think we can do a better job, um of being a little bit more sport specific, of like, you want to be an orchestra player, then we have to act like an orchestra player. Like we have to practice this way. Like maybe put off, I know there's some auditions coming down the road. It's like maybe put off the recital, like put off that type of training. I really do. I rarely call practicing. I call it like training. Like, what are we training for? I'm trying to use language that's as specific as possible, so that I can be as honest as possible with myself about like, what am I training for? and then all kinds of priorities and things fall into place at that point. And decision making process is much easier too, in terms of like, what should I be doing right now? Should I be playing an hour and a half long recital a few days before an audition? Should I be playing an hour and a half long recital a few days before, playing a Mahler symphony? I mean, to me, that's a bad choice. And I've made lots of bad choices playing wise, as evidenced, what I just talked about. That, like, okay, I've been down that road. I've been to near injury, so I don't make those choices anymore. Recitals are going to happen in the summertime, at a more appropriate kind of time. So I like what you said about that, though, just like, uh, the sprint versus the marathon. But I think it's more like what you had said, like trying to be as sport specific as possible is going to actually kind of generate the like greatest amount of success, I think, for all of us. So
Yeah.
took a
Well,
long time to get there.
yeah. Well, there's no perfect answer. There's no perfect
Oh,
solution to the
yeah.
problem. But it's like, I understand, and to a certain extent, I do agree with the idea that it's best to be well-rounded, to have as many tools in your toolbox as possible.
Yeah.
However, the reality of life, and especially if you're trying to be a professional player, um, is that a lot of the stuff that we're being I went to school in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
So the way that you are trained or taught in a school of music is not particularly applicable to the real world.
Right.
And you can even see that in other disciplines, even
Sure.
like things that you learn in a business school. It's like, okay, this is the theory, but this is what really happens. So it almost seems like in a perfect world, you would be able to kind of create tracks. I mean, certainly you can do a classical track and a jazz track, and some people have a commercial track that's sort of in between them. But to help people to actually understand and apply the theories to a very, very practical situation, so that when they leave school with their degree, that they are ready. They're actually ready to do what it is they're trying to do, as opposed to, like, you're saying you had to figure out so many things, and you're going to make some mistakes, and you're going to for some people it actually costs them the career, either because they blow themselves out physically,
Right.
or they burn themselves out mentally,
Right.
and they can't handle it. So
Well, it's interesting. Like, I think, I mean, I was fortunate, and I'm sure you feel the same way, though, to about yourself, that like we've had like great teachers, like am incredibly fortunate to have studied with Scott Thornburg and with Jim Thompson for a year, and then the people that I've like played for professionally beyond that, for professional advice. But like, I think that I probably had a fairly typical like undergraduate experience of, you know, um, I won't say like a fire hose of etudes, but like, a bunch of etudes, right? And so like, I think that how we're like, and I can only speak to the trumpet part of things. I don't know about flutes or clarinets or whatever, but like, I'm not sure that like playing a bunch of etudes is serving the need for either playing a military band, which is arguably they are hiring more people than probably anybody else. Just the number, the top military, there's going to be more openings in a top military band like every year than there's going to be in a top 5 orchestra, or even top 20 orchestra probably. So the military band thing is like, I'm not sure that people are getting well prepared for that. And then the orchestra thing, I'm not sure that people are well served by playing, just like 5 Charliers a week or something. Now, obviously, I don't think anybody's really doing 5 Charliers, but like, I'm not sure that like how we're trained is sort of congruent with like what the gig, the ambiguous gig, is going to be after school is over. Whereas, I kind of recorded a bunch of etudes and like easier etudes, these Verm etudes and I'm like recording these things and I'm going, I know that some people kind of know about these, but like this is like way more interesting to play because it's easier and you can focus on like articulation and you're not worried about like these like intricate lines in a Charlier or whatever. And I thought these should really be more of a staple diet in like particularly people that are interested in doing the orchestra thing, where like we really focus on like just like uniform articulation over 5 lines or something. Like we're so conditioned to like got to play 2-page Brandt etudes or 2-page Charliers or something. It's like that has never been a part of my career. Like literally nobody has ever paid me to play an etude. Nobody has paid me to play 2 pages of something. I mean, 2 pages of 4 or 5 pages of Mahler 5, but like you're resting. I mean, there's all kinds of rest in there, So, and I mean, I would argue that like there are more notes in a Charlier 2 than there are in all of Mahler 5. I mean, somebody can do the math and figure that out, but maybe I'm wrong. But I just feel like in terms of just like the education and like what are we training people for is like kind of not what the education, like I'm not sure that everybody's getting properly trained for like life after school. So I don't I don't play a lot of shows, but when we do play shows here in San Diego, I mean we do a lot of pop stuff, and so I'm definitely grateful for the exposure that I had in school to be playing in big bands and to be able to know how to play in the upper register, lead trumpet. I don't really improvise, but just the style stuff that I was exposed to early on. So I'm grateful for those experiences. But I look back and I think I'm not totally sure that like trying to play the hardest solo rep and the hardest etudes possible or whatever, like I don't use any of those things. I don't think. I mean, one could argue, but like we also know that like just because you learn Charlier number 26 or something, that like just because you learn that doesn't automatically mean like, well, you're qualified to play in the New York Philharmonic. Like like that's not a thing. Like you could play that beautifully, whatever this etude is, beautifully, but I'm not sure that, like these concepts are like always carrying over into like, okay, well, what is real life trumpet playing? What does that actually look like for the professional, the quote unquote professional, right? Of whether it's freelancing, you're going to make a career out of like playing lots of different styles and with lots of different groups and making yourself malleable in that way and valuable in that way, by the way, of being able to play in lots of different styles convincingly, not an orchestral player trying to play, trying to play second trumpet on Singing in the Rain or something, but like really trying to be the second trumpet player playing Singing in the Rain. So malleability is an awesome thing, I think, for a lot of people who may not just want to do the orchestra thing. And I think a lot of people may know me as like an orchestra trumpet player, but I don't really feel like I fit that kind of mold. And I'm grateful for all of those other experiences that I had in school, in the Marine Band, and they've served me well, that to be able to have success in a lot of different sort of musical arenas where I can feel fairly comfortable. But I'm not totally sure that doing trumpet competitions, learning the hardest possible rep, all this stuff, like and by the way, I'll mention too, like with YouTube and social media and whatever, it's overwhelming to kind of like see the talent level that's out there, right? Like, I mean, it's like you go, I don't think that people fully understand that like what we see from recordings, videos, whatever from like these sort of like rock star superstar trumpet players, like that's also not the requirement to have a successful career. It's like I don't have to single tongue 16th notes at 130 to be considered like a good trumpet player. Like I can figure other things out, ways of articulating to get my point across. I think a lot of people sort of hear people play, young people hear people play and get depressed, or like they think like that's the level. I'm not near that level, and it's like nobody's near that level. I mean, there are people that do things on our instruments that are just unbelievable, but that's not necessarily the level in order to have a successful career. So I think there are lots of different disconnects happening all at the same time, both the type of education, the focus of the education, and then couple that with like our amazing exposure to all of these great players at our fingertips on our cell phones, or laptops or whatever, that like we can hear these just incredible players. So there are like several disconnects happening at the same time, where most people, you know, are, especially if you're winning an orchestra job, or like the requirement is like the hardest thing you're going to have to play, the trickiest thing you're going to have to play on an orchestra audition is probably Petrushka. And it's like, that's not, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that difficult to play. So that's my 2 cents on that. But
Yeah, it's the practicality of things.
yeah, yeah,
I think when we're looking at anything, ultimately we should be trying to find the most efficient and effective way to prepare for whatever we want to do.
yeah,
And I think I like to look at things as, what is the essence of what this is trying to accomplish? What's the fundamental? And I think sometimes that we get way too caught up in the traditions of things or the dogmas of things, instead of thinking, okay, well, what was the purpose of, why did Charlier write these etudes? What was he trying to accomplish with this? Now, is there a better way of utilizing this concept that's going to be more applicable to our current situation, either as an industry or my current situation as an individual? And then finding a way to take the idea and modify it to fit. Like, for example, if you're a college student, you're playing lots of etudes, you're playing lots of excerpts, and but if you want to be a commercial player, there aren't that many. There are no commercial excerpts except for Paul Barron, who I've had on the show, who is a very, very fantastic player, and especially in the realm of commercial, and Broadway is kind of his niche, that the musical thing, who wrote 2 books of excerpts on Broadway tunes. So
have to check that out.
yeah, so that's the kind of stuff. It's like, well, how is playing this excerpt, a classical excerpt, is going to help me if I'm trying to be a Broadway player, I'm prepping for a road show, or if I'm a commercial player, so I think it's taking the idea, which is a great idea, and then applying it in a very specific way that's going to provide you the exact results that you need.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just, when I give classes around the country, I hear people play, let's say, a Brandt etude, and they're going for it. I'm like, yeah, great, okay, cool. Now let's hear this Beethoven Leonore call, and then it's like, what happened? Like what? Like you were like going for this, but then, and so there's a disconnect too, and just like the concept of taking an audition, and like playing an excerpt for people, versus like playing an etude, that I mean, excerpts are obviously like, they're just vehicles for like, can you showcase, we just want you to showcase like what you're capable of doing, or showing control over the instrument. And so etudes do function that same way, right? Of like, we're trying to show the maximum amount of control that we can demonstrate on the instrument. And so I think we could agree that Charliers are, that's the creme de la creme, right? Or um, Smith top tones, or the Biche etudes. Like, these are like some of the most challenging things, certainly that I've come across. I'm sure there are other more challenging books out there, but just sort of like universally. And so, like you said, we're trying to get certain concepts across within these etudes. My, I guess, general criticism is that, like, I hear a lot of people then go, well, that's an etude. I have to do this other thing on an excerpt. Again, sort of speaking specific to like an orchestra type thing, or a band audition, which I've certainly sat in on a number of those. That, like, there does seem to be a disconnect, and the people that win jobs are the people, and by the, and I think the people who are successful in, like, in their careers, maybe freelancing or whatever, are the people that can really marry these things together and say, what I've worked on in this etude, I can now express in real music, if we can say real music, what I'm getting paid for, let's say. That these are not separate things, that I can say, oh, I've worked on my articulation on this thing, and now I can apply it to the music that I'm being paid to play. So there just seems to still be like some, not some, like a great deal of disconnect between, like, again, like, we're learning all these etudes, but then what does the actual job entail, and then can we apply what we've learned to this music? That I get, and I like the idea of, like, training harder than what the actual, experience is going to be. So I hear lots of people training hard on the etudes in the practice rooms and the recitals and everything, but then I hear people show up at auditions, and it's like, you train the wrong things. Like, you're not actually demonstrating what you've learned in the practice room, or for the recital or whatever. So it's not my place to necessarily fix those things. Fix them with my own, the people that play for me.
But you actually just brought up a interesting question, kind of popped up in my mind when you're talking about that, which is, you were talking about when you did the audition for Montreal, that Renee helped you with that process.
Yeah.
Do you feel like in the educational process that you were trained on how to actually audition?
No, and that's, and that's no, well, I should say no and yes. So in my undergrad, I don't know that I was, I think it was just like, and this is no offense to any of the people that I study with, because I've got an excellent education, but I don't think that there are a lot of people out there who actually, there are some, that can actually coach someone through the audition experience. And yeah, because an audition experience is not a necessarily musical experience. And it's more of a mental thing, actually, because I should say, at a certain level, it is about just making choices. Obviously we have to practice the excerpts. We have to present them in a way that we're going to showcase our strengths and sort of like shade our weaknesses. And obviously we are going to play, quote unquote, musically, but a lot of that is like, that has to be built in. It's not spur of the moment stuff. Like, it's like learning how to paint a Monet painting, but like you're just copying the Monet over and over and over and over again to make it like look like the Monet painting. We're not trying to like paint a Monet painting like, well, here I decided to use, like, make this barn blue instead of red, and it's like, well, that's not actually what we're looking for. We still want the red barn on the painting. So all of that to say that, like, I distinctly remember the first time I played for Renee. We were like in the locker room, men's locker room in basement of the Meyerhoff Center in Baltimore, and he said, "What do you want?" And I played like maybe 4 or 5 excerpts, and he looked at me and he said, you don't need a trumpet lesson. And I said, yeah, I mean, I'm not looking for a lesson, but like, what, what are you hearing? He's like, well, you sound like you play in a band. And I was like, well, Renee, I do play in a band. And we had, kind of a little chuckle about that. But he's like, no, seriously, you sound like you play in a band, and we need to like make you sound like you play in an orchestra. And so over that the educational experience, what I learned from him, I mean, we literally, I think I played for him about 10 times before the Montreal audition. And like, eventually we got to a point where we were like, we were on stage or out in the lobby, and we'd set up like 50 feet apart from each other, and I would play, and then he would play, and I'd be like, okay. And then I would play back for him, and he'd be like, right, do that, you know? And it was a similar experience to what I had with Jim Thompson, which was, I would play something, and I was working on the Marine Band audition, and I would play something and go, yeah, don't do this other thing here, right? And then he would maybe kind of show me some stuff, and then I would play. He's like, yeah, just do that every single time. Like, don't deviate from that because that's where you sound your best, and that's the sort of feel of this march, or this, Ives America, very whatever, and so like, Jim was a master of Jim Thompson was a master of like preparing me, and I think all of his students, for like the audition experience, and learning how to kind of like take somebody's playing and really just sort of like I want to say like kind of compress it like you would like a diamond, that like just kind of keep going, like, right, just keep doing more of this, just more of this, and like, don't do it's like you realize, and Renee had said this too to me, 8 years later after leaving Jim's studio, he said at some point in time, like great trumpet playing is just about making the right decisions and not making the wrong decisions, because we can, as brass players, we can easily get ourselves into trouble, but we actually can easily keep ourselves out of trouble if we just make different decisions. And so the idea is to just keep making the series of right decisions, right? And so or the best decisions for the individual. And so sort of realizing, and it's a hard thing to do. I mean, it is a really hard thing to do in the context of an audition. And there aren't a lot of people who have won auditions that are like full-time professors, right? If we look at like the grand scope of all the people that are teaching trumpet, not a lot of them have actually won auditions. And I realize I'm probably going to hear from a lot of people about this, but I don't think I apologize for it to say that, like, if you haven't won an audition, if you haven't won an audition, then, and if you haven't even taken like a real audition and experienced what does it mean to go from the first round to the second round, what does it mean to then like go from the second round to the third round, what does it mean to go from like a final round into like a super final round, and you're playing like if somebody hasn't gone through that process, then they're guessing. And though we can, as a professor, like we, you still prepare people how to play the trumpet, and you can probably have students that like can go out, but like a lot of it is just experience. A lot of it really is just like, okay, I figured out how to get out of the first round. I figured out what I need to do to get out of the first round. Now, what do I need to do? What's the next thing that they're looking for? Because it's not always the same thing in every round. That demonstrating and like, what it means to go through these rounds and how I conceptualize it might be different than other people. But like, all of that to say that like, the things that I learned from Jim Thompson and Renee, and then other people after that were just like really focusing on like making the right decisions with every note on the page, and going, okay, good, just do it like that. Just keep doing it like this. Just that one measure. Just do it like this all the time. Okay, now can we put two measures together like that? Okay, good. Do these two measures exactly like that. And the idea is like, we're just bringing out the best in our own playing, right? Like, it's not like I'm trying to copy Phil Smith, or I'm trying to copy, Chris Martin, or I'm trying to copy Martin, like people that I admire their playing. I'm not trying to copy them. I'm trying to do what's best for me, so that like when I get into the situation of okay, it's go time, play pictures at an exhibition, that I can rely on what works for me, not trying to like copy what somebody else has done that may not work for me conceptually or physically. So that process though of like how do you teach an audition, you know, is like you have to put students through an audition. You have to like you must make time. If the goal of your studio or one's studio is to like have players that are going to go win auditions. Now, if the goal of the studio is to teach trumpet players how to go teach band, or go teach the trumpet in some fashion at the university, okay, that's like a different thing. But if the goal of the underlying goal is to like get people playing positions, like the audition process, it must be taught, as well as possible, and have people in, other professional players in that have won auditions that can sit down and go, okay, like part of the masterclass experience is setting aside 2 hours to go, we're going to hear everybody play this stuff, and we're going to have a couple of rounds here, and I'm going to sit here, or person X is going to sit there and take notes, and we're going to do this. And it has to be like a weekly thing, if not even I mean, we don't have, as trumpet players, we certainly have more auditions than like tuba players. We just hired an awesome tuba player here in San Diego, and I'm like, we heard a number of great tuba players, and I thought to myself, how do these guys do this? Like they have like one audition a year. Like, how are these guys bringing their A game in that one moment in time? I mean, trumpet players, like, we may have like 3 or 4 auditions a year, but if we compare that to like actors have daily auditions, and so like if I were teaching in a studio that the goal was to get people jobs, I would be doing daily like auditions, because the audition experience is unlike anything else. It's not, you have to provide all the information, right? I mean, it's one thing to sit down and uh, play pictures at an exhibition with an orchestra, but like, okay, you open the thing, but like within 10 seconds, like the whole brass section's playing, and then you're like, you're on rails, and you're just like, all the information's given to you, the volume, tempo, all the stuff, intonation, everything's given to you. That's easy. Relatively speaking, that's like an easy thing. What's unbelievably challenging is to sit down and go, okay, I'm the only one in the room, or I'm the only one on stage, and present an excerpt and make people believe that like you're giving them all the information. Like you're playing Petrushka, and people can hear the snare drum like in their head while you're playing. You're playing Mahler 5, and people can, like, you can play in a manner that like brings in the orchestra. You're playing any number of excerpts. It's not just about playing the excerpt, and so these are like learned things, right? Yes, it helps to actually have played the excerpts in context with the orchestra, but again, I'm sorry, I'm kind of talking a lot here, but like you kind of touched a nerve of like how to take an audition. It must be taught. Like throwing people out there to just go, okay, like go do your best, and I hope that you win. That's not preparing people, in my opinion. Like that's like, and I've learned the hard way, and I've certainly had. I mean, I was very fortunate to have won that position in the Marine Band very young, and so I've always had the sort of financial backstop to be able to go out and take auditions and to experiment and to fail. But a lot of people don't have that, sort of financial backstop. And as Andy Ballio had said to me, like, most people are gonna, if you don't win an audition when you're fairly young and you have time and energy, you're gonna run out of money or run out of patience. Like one of the two things. Like life happens, right? Like everybody's continuously getting older. We keep adding to our list of responsibilities, whether it's getting married or having kids or, you know, buying a house, whatever the thing is. I mean, at some point in time, if you're like, this isn't working, then it's not working, you know? And I think that like, Andy had said like winning an audition is kind of a war of attrition at some point in time, that like most people will give up because they either are a great player that doesn't understand how an audition works, or they've just been like kind of told they were a great player, but maybe really aren't, like they don't have the right skills to actually win the audition. But I think like auditions could be run, from my side of it, listening to people, I hear like there's only a couple of people that can actually do this, and you can tell the people who have the experience, of taking auditions, and I think that like there could be much more focus, in how to take an audition, how to prepare mentally to take an audition, so that like these things aren't separate from the education, right? It's like you're going to school and then you go, okay, I'm going to drive to Washington, D.C. and take an audition for the Army Band or something. Well, if you've never really done that in your preparation, there's potential for that to be a completely overwhelming experience that you don't even know which end is up. I mean, you come back home and you're like, that did not go well. And you're like, why not? Like the reasons are too long to list. Like it was just completely overwhelming. So I think there's plenty of room, in studios to actually prepare people to, how to take an audition, how to present their best, you know, so that there is an honest. Because from our end, you know, we're looking for like not only you know a great player but a good fit, and the good fit is not necessarily really our concern at the moment in the audition. We're just looking for a great player, right? And so I hear a lot of people where I'm like, I think this is a great like we assume going into the audition from the other side of the screen that like all things are equal, right? Like we are, the goal is like we want to hear everybody's best playing, and we're not hearing. I believe we are not hearing everybody's best playing because most of the people, it's an overwhelming experience. They don't know how to take an audition. You can hear glimmers of like, okay, this person actually really is a great player. They just don't know what they're doing. You know, and I don't know how to put that any other way other than to say this person just doesn't know what they're doing. And so we can't hire that even based on an assumption that, okay, we're hearing a great player having a rough day. We can't advance this person, right? But I think if this person maybe had spent a lot more time auditioning, quote unquote, in their studio, classes, that we could have actually heard like a level playing field of like, okay, we've heard, instead of 5 people that kind of know what they're doing audition wise, we could have heard 50 people that know what they're doing. So the playing field is uneven just in that manner of like, there are only a few people who are at any given audition. It's not about necessarily their ability to play their instrument. I think that we're just not hearing, because people don't have the right experience or the right education of how to take an audition. We're just not hearing people's best playing, and so they're just automatically eliminated, you know. And then they go home and they might feel like, man, I'm a terrible trumpet player or whatever, when they're really not. They're just a terrible auditioner. and that skill set can be learned, I believe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. There is an art and a science to it. I mean, if you look at like in the business world, yeah, anybody who's trying to get a job will take an interview, right? So that's how you get a job. You do the interview. But when you get to a certain level, especially when you're talking about things like, you know, you're applying for a C-suite kind of position.
Right.
Most of those people, especially the ones that are looking at getting like in a Fortune 500 company, they have coaches that help them through the interview process.
Right.
To learn how to present themselves. And I think that is, and there's nothing wrong. Well, there is a lot that's wrong with our educational system, but there's a lot that's right. So not
Yeah.
to put anybody down, but like, okay, great. You can teach, you're a great trumpet player. You can teach people how to be great players, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're teaching them how to be great auditioners, or
Right.
that, or you can teach them how to be an educator, but you can't teach them how to be a performer. It's okay. It's like, understand where your strengths are. Like, even you're saying, like, for the audition process, you have to understand where your strengths are. You have to maximize your strengths. You have to mitigate your weaknesses. And I think when we stop thinking like, well, if I'm a professor, then I can teach everything there is to know about trumpet.
Right.
No, that's not the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate that I studied with people who encouraged me to go play for other people. That they were, self-aware that like they didn't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, and so and I've taken that approach. When I saw success when I had played for Renee the first time, I felt like that first audition that I took for the Atlanta Symphony, I think it was for their associate principal opening. This would have been again in like mid 2007, I think. I was like, I'm a professional. I know how to play the notes on the page. I don't need help playing notes on the page. And I went, and I made the semifinal round, and I was like, okay, cool. And I played my semifinal round, and I got done, and I was like, yeah, like I did the best I could. I didn't really miss anything, maybe one note or something. And then I didn't advance to the final round, and I was like, I wasn't disappointed necessarily. I was just confused, and I thought, okay, I need help. Like, even though we're taught, that like, maybe not all of us are taught. I don't know that I was taught this, but like I certainly felt like, well, I'm a professional. Like, I'm getting paid to play the trumpet. I should be able to like practice these excerpts and then go present them and win another job or something. And so after that experience in Atlanta, I thought I'm very confused and I need to unconfuse myself. And the way the audition process is like, I mean, you can ask for feedback, but like you may not get it, and even the feedback that you do get may still be confusing, because if you think that you've played well and you're getting like nothing but criticism, then like there's a disconnect there. That particular audition, I don't think that I received any feedback, so I certainly left like not understanding what the deal was. But then I quickly found out when I played for Renee. He was like, oh yeah, dude, I'm sure that you showed up and played and didn't miss anything, but that's not an orchestral like sound. Um, and so working with Renee and then getting into Montreal and quickly realizing like that was not really the place for me. I love playing in the orchestra. I didn't particularly enjoy living in Montreal for a variety of reasons, but I thought I gotta get out of here. I gotta go take, and the only way to do it is to go win another job, or just leave. And I wasn't sort of like prepared to just walk away from the position. And so at some point in time, I was playing a lot for Russ, my colleague there, and he was very helpful. I mean, I learned a ton from playing next to him and playing for him. And then I just started to kind of develop. I'm involved in. I've been involved in triathlons. I've been involved in the sort of CrossFit thing, and just like I love sports in general. I mean, just watched a great NFL game last night, and you start to look at like really great players like Tom Brady, and you realize like, okay, Tom's going out there and like, whether or not you like Tom, that's irrelevant, but like, Tom's going out there playing at such a high level, and yes, he has to go out and execute every Sunday. Sunday is his audition, right? Like the guy goes out, throws the football, runs the football, whatever he's going to do, avoids getting tackled, all the things he's going to do. But like behind the scenes, and not even that much behind the scenes, I mean, he's got a head coach, he's got like an offensive line coach, he's got probably a quarterback coach, he's got a personal chef, he's got a nutritionalist helping him, I mean, the guy has like probably 10 people like behind the scenes saying, do this, don't do that. Right. I mean, he has literal coaches. And so I started to take that mentality, going, okay, I need more help. Like, I'm just not figuring this out. I'm doing something maybe wrong, but certainly not like, because I had started taking some auditions again, and I wasn't really going anywhere. And so I started taking this mentality of like, well, vocalists do this. Like, they have, I mean, they have vocal coaches, like superstar vocalists, like they tour with a pianist and a vocal coach and stuff, you know. I'm like, why don't we do this as instrumentalists, you know? And I was like, I have to sort of bury my ego here, or at least put it in the back seat and go, I need to go play for people. I need more people on my team, because right now I've got one, and I'm still trying to sort this out on my own, even though I've had, you know, more success than many people just by winning 2 auditions in and of itself. And so, you know, I started, the first person that I went and played for, Andrew McCandless, and he was a great help to me. And I'll never forget the first time with Montreal had, we did yearly run out concerts to Toronto. And so I wrote, and I didn't know Andrew at all. And I maybe communicated with him on Facebook or somehow got his number. And I wrote him, I said, hey, I introduced myself. I said, we're going to be in Montreal. I was wondering if I might be able to come play for you. And, he was like, you know, I could sense some hesitation. He's like, sure, you know, like, we can do that. And I said, I'm preparing for some auditions and, you know, whatever. And so, so I go to his place. He's got this like practice shed in his backyard, and very cool setup. And I played like 5. It was the same thing like Renee. I played like 5 excerpts, and he said, you don't need a lesson. Like, I don't understand what's happening here. And I said, okay, well, you guys at the time, they had just hired a new associate principal in Toronto. I said, you guys just had an audition. I wasn't able to take it because I was not a Canadian citizen. But I'm taking auditions. And so you just heard like 30 or 50 players come through and take this audition. I want to know what you know about what you heard. Like, what I just presented to you, how does that stack up against what you heard? And I'm not even talking about just the winner, but like in the totality. And then he went, "Oh, okay. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, okay, cool. So, okay, so here's what's wrong with you." And then he proceeded to like say, "Yeah, man, you sound like you're playing the gig. It doesn't sound like you're like kind of giving me like a polished, super polished thing. Some of the stuff is super polished, but like some of it is like, it feels like you're, you know, just kind of playing too loud or whatever the criticisms were." And I went, "Right, see, this is valuable information to me because I only know what I know. I only know what I'm able to kind of do. This is valuable information." And then then we had a totally different relationship at that point, because it was not necessarily teacher student. That wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for a coach, you know, and somebody that like, I'm like, you hear things that I don't hear, and I trust your ears, and you're an unbelievable trumpet player. And it's not that I want to be like you. I just need to know what you know because you just heard all these people. And so that started then, playing for people across the country, um, particularly if they had just recently had a trumpet audition, and maybe it was something I wasn't necessarily interested in, or maybe it was one that was like coming down the pike that I was like, what are you looking for here? You know, like, I have confidence that I can play the trumpet, but I maybe lack confidence in like, or at least lack an understanding of like, what is it that you're looking for? And so that was like, you know, just sort of like putting that ego in the, like in the rear view mirror and going, just tell me what you hear. You know, like the substitute for the audition is to just play for the people that are actually going to be at the audition, or, you know, that have just heard people, and go, you have more knowledge than I do, so give it to me, you know. And you know, so I've played for you know, Jim Wilt, Mark Hughes, Ethan Bensdorf, Jim Ross, Karen Donnelly up in National Arts Center. I played for Tom Hooten. I played for I'm sure that I'm missing people here, but and I apologize if they're listening and I forgot their name off the top of my head, but like I play for a number of people who like I consider them my personal coaches. They may not consider me like, the same way, but what I need, I realize I'm like, I need like coaching on this. Not so much now, like, 10, 11 years later, but I still play for people. If I'm going to take an audition, like I'm going to go play for, a number of people, and not assume that I'm going to be able to figure this out. And I try to use those experiences as like, okay, today's the audition. I'm going to play 5 or 6 excerpts for you. We're going to talk, and I'm going to play like, so I kind of set the agenda a little bit when I go play for them to try to mimic, like an audition, and try to say, okay, let's say this is like a final round here. Let's play through, 15 excerpts or something, and, whatever. So, but I had to do that for me, right? Meaning I had to figure that out for myself. Nobody told me to go like, oh, maybe you should go play for this person, or maybe you don't know what you're doing. It's like I said, I was very lucky that I had a financial backstop to be able to like think about that, and then to be able to go and pay people for their expertise and for their coaching ability. A lot of people don't necessarily have that, and a lot of people, their egos get in the way. They're like, I couldn't possibly go play for other people. I'm no longer a student. I'm a professional. I'll figure this out on my own. I'm like, okay, well, good for you if you can do that. I'm not built that way. Like I'm built more like, yeah, I'll take as much coaching as my sort of pocketbook can handle, and time will allow, just to get as many perspectives, of like, again, just trying to take this coal and just keep compressing, making the right decisions until it's so compact that it's like it's so hard that it's so hard to make the wrong decisions, let's say. That that I'm trying to get this diamond, that it's not about perfection, because diamonds have flaws in them, right? But it's like it's about going, okay, this thing, these 45 excerpts or whatever, however long the list is like, I've now compressed this into just a series of right decisions through coaching, and being coach. I think I'm coachable, so just keep making the right decisions, so that on the day of the audition that I can go, okay, it's just going from it's not going from A to Z, meaning like the top of the excerpt to the bottom of the excerpts. It's going from A to B to C, like just keep making the right decisions. If we get off this path that this map that we've kind of made for ourselves, I know that I've only taken like a side street, and I know how to get back onto the main thing, meaning, oh, I cracked a note, but I know I'm actually trying to get here, so so that when the audition, things kick in of like, you know, it's a different experience, right? That if there is a moment of like uncertainty, or, oh man, they want this excerpt and this is not a strength of mine, that I can rely on having been coached and knowing how to shade, like, well, I can just kind of back off here. I can kind of step on the gas there, whatever the thing may be, that I have a deep understanding through being coached, and not just my own practicing, because I think all of us have blind spots when we're doing our own practicing. So, so that like I've literally compressed as many right decisions into this like diamond, of an audition, so that I go, I'm hopefully not making bad decisions, that I'm only making good decisions. And for me, and I think for most people, when they make their best decisions, then they are sounding their best. And I think for most people at a certain level, when they do sound their absolute best, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but like when they sound their best, they're going to be in the final round. And then that's where the equal playing field is, right? Of like, we have 2 or 3 people that like we are actually hearing their best playing. And if I'm taking an audition, then I know like, okay, now this is the real competition, if you will. Although I don't view auditions as competitions, but this is really where the decision making process is of these final 2 or 3 or 4 people, of like, okay, we're the 4 people that showed up, were able to exhibit our best playing. Now the playing field's level, now they get to sort of like decide between these handful of people, like what's going to work best for them, so but those are things that, like, those are, for me, I think that they have to be taught, in terms of the audition experience, that just kind of throwing people in and going, good luck, but yeah, so.
Well, I mean, I love that because, you know, there are so many places you can go to get the foundation skills,
Right.
To learn
Right.
how to play the horn. And then there are so many teachers that can help you to refine those skills. But this is kind of one of those specialty aspects that, if regardless of whether you're in the classical world and going on the audition circuit, you're trying to audition for military band, you're auditioning for a Broadway show, whatever it is, understanding that process, how the interview process actually works, how the audition process actually works.
Right.
That is, I think that in many ways is the ability, and some people have kind of developed that skill innately, or however you want to think about it, lucked out at it or whatever. But when you can gain that skill, then that's what's going to bring everything else together and
Right.
help to make a professional, to make a career out of it.
And to your point, I mean, I know that I've been critical of sort of generally speaking, the educational thing. I do believe and know that I got a proper education on the trumpet, right? It wasn't Scott Thornburg's job to get me into the Montreal Symphony. It wasn't his job to get me, into the Marine Band. It was his job to make sure that I could play music, like teach me how to phrase and teach me how to articulate and teach me how. It was Jim Thompson's job to take this knowledge that I'd gotten over 4.5 years or whatever with Scott, and then go, okay, let's bring this a little more into focus of like, okay, you want to take an audition for the Marine Band? Okay, cool. Like, let me help you in addition to like, his buzzing basics routine and getting me onto that type of thing, how to better understand how to physically play the trumpet and physically prepare how to play the trumpet. And so it's easy to be critical, right? But I didn't know at 21 years old. I mean, if you had told me at 21, like, yeah, you're gonna win this job in the Marine Band, then you're gonna go play in the Montreal Symphony, and then you're gonna play in Seattle Symphony, you're gonna go play, in all these places, and you're gonna end up, at in the San Diego Symphony. I mean, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Right. I mean, so the teacher's job isn't to like guide people's career. My criticism was there are schools out there who clearly have some fine trumpet players attend and regularly. Right. And so they're kind of like little factories of like, they're putting out a lot of players that win auditions. But I think that some of these places, I think more people could be on that page. I think more people could be trained how to just fundamentally play the trumpet and not just go, okay, learn Charlie A1. It's like that I see a lot of people being just sort of thrown into things when they don't necessarily have like the fundamentals like solid. But nonetheless, I was critical maybe a little bit earlier, but it is obviously not the professor's job to dictate a student's career path. It is certainly easy to look back and go, well, I wasn't prepared for this. Well, it's like, but that also wasn't my goal when I mean, it was like nobody knew what was going, I didn't know what was going to happen. And so when things started to come into sharper focus for me of, okay, the focus before was just like, get a job, right? Like that's when I think about it now, it's like, that's not a lot of focus actually. I mean, it's certainly some focus, but like that seems nebulous, but I did it and won the position. And then it became like, well, now I would like a job in an orchestra. And So I'll just take the first thing that kind of came down the pike, and that was like this Atlanta thing, and then eventually Montreal Symphony thing. And then realizing, like, after playing there, which I thought was only going to be maybe 2 or 3 years, and it turned into 11. Um, that going, okay, I'd kind of gone back to, like, I just got to get out of here. I'll take anything. I know I'm like a halfway decent trumpet player. I'm playing fourth trumpet right now, but like, I think I could play second trumpet someplace, and I did well at a few second trumpet auditions, but then sort of like getting more and more into focus of like what actually works for me, and what actually, it's not just about like where I want to be, but like what do I actually like e- excel at, and that became more and more apparent of like going back to like I really am better in the upper register, which lends itself to sort of more principal playing. I did think that like an ideal spot for me would actually be more of a third associate principal, because usually the associates are tasked with the pop stuff, and I love playing pops. Like, I'm not ashamed to admit that. Like, that's one of my favorite things about playing here. But all that to say that, like, the focus shifted, and came into much more focus as my career progressed. And then, what we were saying before of like, well, then we need to be much more sport specific, right? So I was prepared, general physical preparedness through an undergraduate degree, but not sport specific necessarily. And so I think that a lot of people, the disconnect is like, people when they leave school or whatever think like, well, I need to just keep doing this general physical preparedness and whatever, but like, actually at some point you really do got to pick a sport, and really train for that sport if you want to see success. In terms of, I mean, I won't define other people's success for them, but if they want a full-time job, there are only a handful of avenues to sort of do that. And not even a full-time job, but like a full-time sort of like playing career, that I don't know too many trumpet players that make a career out of being a soloist, or a classical soloist, for instance, or playing necessarily like modern music. There are some people that do that, but like, really, and it's not my place or anybody's place, again, to sort of dictate what somebody needs to do. But for everyone out there listening, I mean, we've all had to do this of like, what's sport specific to me, and then go find those coaches that can then help me sort of like, rein in or again start making better decisions on how to succeed at taking auditions. Maybe fourth trumpet auditions are not, even though I'd won the position, maybe that's not actually where I'm best serving my own needs and like where I would be most comfortable. And when I started taking, associate principal and principal auditions, like, I actually started seeing a lot more success, and then really going, oh, okay, maybe this is what I should be doing. And then, finding other people, to help me along that journey that are like sport specific, that are like, okay, I'm going to play for these principal players because I'm taking principal auditions, so for people that are out there listening or whatever, like, you know, it's not just about playing for like the big name trumpet. I mean, if you're like a trumpet player, again, I'll speak to orchestral minded people, that if you're somebody who's like, I don't really want a principal trumpet job. I feel much more comfortable playing in the section, let's say as a second trumpet player. It's like, well, then go play for second trumpet players. Like I don't know that you need to play for a principal trumpet player. Like, it's not about being, we all have this concept of like, well, if you're the first player, you're the best player. It's like, that's like high school, like that's not the real world. So the real world is all of, like, if it's an orchestra, you have four players who are all like incredible trumpet players, and each of them have their own skill set. That's why they are in the positions that they're in, because each chair requires a different skill set. And so, if you're somebody who's like, man, I'm really kind of more interested in playing second, that's like that better, my skill set is more geared towards that. Go play for second trumpet players. Go. It's not just about like showing up and like, oh, I studied with this name person or that name person. It's like, be sport specific. Go play for the people who have that knowledge of that chair and can help guide not only the audition process to you, but like also guide you through like the intricacies of playing second trumpet on, you know, Symphony X.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like if you think about the sport specific thing, you brought up Tom Brady, who I love and hate. I hate him because yeah, he went to Michigan, I went to Ohio State, so
Oh, dude. I mean, I'm a Michigan guy. I was just in Ann Arbor a week ago, and
there's that. But I mean, I love Brady and respect Brady because he epitomizes what you have been talking about so much in this talk, which is make the right decisions.
Mhm.
He is not the most gifted athlete on the face of
Right.
the
Not at all.
not by he ain't
Yep.
that guy,
Yep.
but he rarely makes dumb mistakes, and if he does make a mistake, he will correct it the next time through, and you
Right.
bet he's not going to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. I mean, if we stay with the football theme, I mean, you can look at somebody like Patrick Mahomes and go, that guy makes a lot of mistakes, but he's an incredible athlete and can get himself out of trouble, you know? And so we know people like that on our instruments that are like, this person's kind of a freak show, but they're like regularly getting themselves into trouble. But the amazing part is that they can kind of pull it off in the performance, or they can kind of. And I go, okay, well, for me personally recognize like I'm not that type of athlete on the trumpet. Like I'm not. I don't. I don't want to put myself in a place where I have to rely on some off the wall underhanded pass to like get the high C to come out because I made bad decisions leading up to the high C. Like I'm much more interested in like building a series of right decisions for me to be able to go, yeah, like that was impressive, or whatever, that I didn't have to rely on scrambling and like holding the ball for 10 seconds, running around in the backfield going, how am I going to get, and then doing it and being like, okay, I did it. Unbelievable. Like that's not the type of trumpet player that I am. But we all know people that are like that are like so talented that they can kind of just do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And I'm jealous of those people, but I'm also aware of like that's not what I'm striving for. I'm striving for like hike me the ball and I'm getting rid of the thing almost as soon as possible because that's the right decision process of like, right, the plays are all unfolding in front of me in the orchestra. Here's my pass off to this person or whatever, and I'm like just doing short passes. I do not want to be in the position of making like, and sometimes we are forced into bad decisions, right? Or at least a different decision making process if the conductor is doing something that's unclear, or you're playing next to somebody, they're struggling. I mean, we're always playing offense and defense when we play with other people.
Mhm.
And by the way, that's like the weird thing about an audition too, is that there's no defense, it's all offense, right? I mean, it's just like you make the decisions, you call the plays, you do everything. In real life, the plays are kind of being called for us. Somebody else is calling the plays. I have to like know how that's going to unfold in front of me and make the right decisions. And so there is a decision making process that happens in live music and with other people on stage. So, but yeah, I mean, like we all know players that can kind of always do it, and I find myself when I've been put in those positions to scramble to go, that's exhausting. I don't like that feeling of like of panic. I'd much rather be the Tom Brady and go, look, I'm just gonna like just keep this in the pocket and just throw the short passes and hand the ball off, and like we're gonna win the game here. So
Yeah. Well, and I think also speaks to longevity of the career,
totally, yeah. I mean, people that have sat in orchestras or even in the band positions, and I would assume in Broadway pits or whatever, that like you know um you want a long, I assume everybody wants a long career, and what worked in our 20s is not going to work in our 40s, and is definitely, I can already see the writing on the wall, is like it's not going to work in our 50s and 60s, and so if you look at somebody like Tom Brady, what he did in his first year of, football playing for the Patriots is probably not what he's doing now. I mean, he'll talk about it, I'm sure, of like how he ate and how he trained. And, I mean, the guy's 45 years old. He's not, there's no way that that guy is training the same way that he trained in the weight room when he was 25. It's just he couldn't take that kind of punishment, and then the people that are taking the real punishment, the people up front or the running backs, it's like they don't have long careers, and because it's just too brutal. And so my goal as a trumpet player is not to be a running back, but to be the quarterback that like is trying not to get sacked and trust the people in front of them that like they're going to protect me, and this play is going to unfold how we've practiced it, how we've rehearsed it, and that I can make this perfect pass and I don't get tackled. I don't get a face full of mouthpiece or face full of dirt, as the case may be.
Well, and that certainly ties it around full circle to what you were talking about earlier about having to adjust the way you approached your practice
Yeah.
to fit the gig. So awesome.
Yeah.
Man, you know what, we could talk about this stuff ever.
Yeah.
I think actually it's give me a great idea. I would love to have a maybe I'll do a special episode somewhere down the line and have a few people talk about the audition practices, know, from the classical world, from the commercial world, and things like that. Like,
that
hey,
would be fascinating. Yeah.
These are the things that this is my experience. This is what I think that people should consider. So I'll keep you in mind for that. So
yeah.
But we do, before I can let you go, we have 3 short segments we need to get through. The shortness will be dependent upon on you and the and answer. Yeah, you need more coffee.
How much time do we have? Sorry, dude. People ask me questions. I'm like, I've spent so much time thinking about like these things, and then I just end up talking too long. So
no,
you're gonna have so much editing to do.
No, I don't edit unless we have a technical issue. I try not to edit because I want this to be real, man. I want this to be real. And that's why I love the way the conversation went. Definitely did not go the way I was thinking it was, but
where did you think it was going to go?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I was thinking we would talk a little bit more about like what you're doing now and some of the stuff. But I think that this conversation we had is really, really needed because apparently it's something that's important to you, and it's something that I've thought about a lot as well. And I think that more people need to consider some of these concepts. And so I think this is just brilliant. This has been one of my favorite conversations that I've had today.
Oh, appreciate it.
All right, and not to date. I mean today. Like
yeah.
I haven't talked to anybody else but you. So anyway, 3 segments to get through. First one brought to us by my good friend Michael Barkley of Barkley Microphones. Great microphones for your recording needs. This is called Sound Off, and Sound Off is about sound. And let's kind of keep riffing on this thing about the auditions and the necessities. When you're thinking about sound and the role of sound in your playing, is there a specific approach that you use or that you would recommend for people to prepare themselves for having the kind of sound that is typically required in an orchestral setting?
Well, I think that the short, and I will give you a short answer right now. I think about sound in terms of energy, and I think about that energy in terms of laser. And so a laser doesn't necessarily flicker. Like a laser is very dense, right? I mean it's just like it is like the densest amount of sort of light. And so one of the things that you wanted to talk about what I'm doing now necessarily, but one of the things that I learned when I started recording myself a lot was when I record in this room, the mic is like 2 inches from the end of my bell. And so, though that's not necessarily normal, right? It's certainly not how I had recorded myself before. I'd recorded, I like to record in large spaces and put the microphone, 10 feet or I would even put the microphone at the back of the hall or something just to hear like what's getting out there. And one of the things that I learned when I first started recording myself was one, I'm not putting out enough sound to really like affect the back of the hall, and two, when I thought that I was trying to be musical, uh, I the energy wasn't there. It was like I was taking a bright light bulb and then like adjusting, like I would have like a dimmer switch on that, and then at points it would like flicker, you know. And so when I moved into the practice room that I'm in here, and was recording all of these etudes that I had done over the last uh how long has it been, 2.5 years, um you know, that when we put the mic up close, I realized like that actually wasn't dimming. It literally was like kind of on and off. Like and so I realized like it was, we can talk about like air and these sorts of things, but really it's an energy concept, meaning it's a combination of air and articulation. And so what I'm looking for, what I value in my playing, and what I look for in other people's playing, particularly in the orchestra, is maximum allowable energy. Meaning, when we see it's easy to play with maximum allowable energy when we see fortissimo, right? That like fortissimo marcato markings over the notes. Long short marcato is like, that's the nuclear option, right? It's just like bam. And then like, where do we lose energy, right? So length is, we're losing energy. So we add, if we have like fortissimo, whole note, like we get the burst of energy at the front of the note, but then like as the note goes on, we tend to like lose energy in the sound. So like, how do we sort of like continue with the energy? And so these are all like things that are in my head about like, how do I play with maximum allowable energy, because we can't play fortissimo on piano, right? And so it's a combination of having a very solid front to virtually every note, and then following through with like, too many times people see piano or pianissimo and think like, oh, I have to take the dimmer switch and turn it all the way down, and they think that like energy is related to volume, when it is related to volume, but it's not just volume. And so you know, trying to keep like everything that I'm playing with like maximum allowable energy, so that I am able to convey um to the microphone, because it's actually harder in the microphone than it is to the back of the hall when I'm in a large space, you know, to be able to convey nonstop energy through a phrase, through an entire etude, through an excerpt or something. And so I would, my suggestion to people is to record themselves as often as possible, and to understand that like, lots of times when we're airballing, or if we're like trying to play softly or decrescendo or whatever, that like, we've taken all the dials and moved them down. And but like, actually maybe only a couple of dials need to be brought down, meaning the volume is decrescendoing, or the volume's coming away, but like, we have to actually put even more energy into the articulation, or more energy into the air. Some people will call that spin maybe, but like, I'm trying to use terms that make sense to me, of like, if I'm playing softly, like I'm actually thinking laser beam, which, growing up, like, you know, the criticism of trumpet, like, it sounds like a laser, you know, it's like, well, that's not the right term. You know, you can say it sounds thin, and sounds shrill, but what I'm looking for is like vibrant, dense playing, which to me, in terms of energy, is a laser beam. So that's the concept that I use when I'm recording myself, and what I'm listening for in my playing, and what I'm listening for in other people's playing, is relentless energy, and just like always playing with I've sort of used the term maximum allowable energy. So so always reaching the ceiling of what we're going for, and not trying to just reach like the minimum, I'm always trying to reach the max. Like, what am I allowed to get away with here? I think that like we're always trying to find a place of comfort on the trumpet, and comfort obviously is mezzo forte and above, right? But like if we say mezzo piano, like that doesn't mean like less comfort. Like I'm still trying to maximize the amount of comfort that I have. And so again, like that's an energy concept, not just like a shying away from the trumpet concept. And like to me, that's not piano. That's like an effect. And so we don't really work with effects in large orchestra. We play pianos that in here would sound like quite loud actually. But like out in a large space that's hundreds of times the size of this small room that I'm in right now, like I do have to keep in mind like piano in here is not the same thing as piano in a 3,000 5,000 seat space. So again, like I'm always trying to like reach the ceiling of what I'm allowed, like volume and energy wise, like what I'm allowed to play versus, well, it says soft, so I'm just going to play as softly as I can. That concept works better for me to try to reach the ceiling than to like be constantly trying to like make it small and make myself kind of small.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. It's a great way about it.
You have the microphone sponsor. I mean, I don't use a Barkley microphone. I'm sorry, but I know that they are great microphones, and I would encourage all of your listeners to go find, particularly a ribbon microphone. The trumpet works very well ribbon microphones work very well for the trumpet, and it gives us like the ability to actually I think get like our true sound out there versus playing on a cell phone or whatever. But like definitely be recording yourself every day for those of you who are listening, just to understand. I mean, it took me at least a year of recording myself like every day to finally feel like I've got the right energy going into this microphone here. And then 18 months later, when we got back to actual like work, in large spaces, it was like, this is way easier. Like, cause I was able to understand like the microphone picks up energy. It does not pick up intent. It does not pick up musical like thought. If I go, oh, I'm gonna just kind of feather into this like the end of this phrase here, what the microphone hears is ba. Even though I might still be making sound, it hears like, and it doesn't mean I'm nervous. It's just like it's a blank canvas, right? And it's just like what I put onto that canvas, it gave back to me with no judgment. I'm the one who's judging it, but I'm going, wait, I wanted that note to be full all the way to the end. And so like realizing like, man, I've been kind of relying too much on like effects in my trumpet playing and not enough on as Jim Wilt would say, like pinning the sound to the wall. Like and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard this phrase, like always keeping your foot like on the gas. It doesn't mean maximum, like we don't do 90 and a 25, but even if you're going 25 miles an hour, you still got to have your foot on the gas, And so realizing like, oh, there are a lot of instances where I was like getting away with taking my foot off the gas. And when I put the microphone 2 inches away from the bell, because the microphone doesn't know that I'm not in a big space, right? The microphone doesn't know anything. It just knows what I give it. And so putting the microphone 2 inches from the end of the bell, like I realized like there's a lot that I can learn from this and did learn from that experience. And again, about energy and going, I've kind of relied a little bit on effects and gotten away with it. And then sort of like changing my thought process. And then in turn, like kind of a little bit physically how to play the instrument that works better for the microphone, works better for my sort of intention on what I'm playing. And then when I take it into larger spaces, it's like just way easier to sort of get those intentions across. So record all the time. That I guess that would be my message.
All right, cool. All right. Well, our next segment is called Geared Up. It is brought to us by Venture Mouthpieces, Venture where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect. Use the code Trumpet Gurus 21 when you purchase, and you get 10% off your order. And this is about gear. And let's kind of roll with this and kind of keep on the same track. So you're talking about energize, right, the energy of the sound. That's an intentional thing. That's a physical thing here. So how do you approach gear in terms of helping to create the right instrument, if you will, to transition from the intention to the actual sound?
So I don't want to give you too long of an answer. So I do play on wedge mouthpieces. So I have one here. We'll see if I can get it into the see like they're concave this way and convex. I don't know if you can totally see that if I get that in there like that, but like they're concave this way and then convex this way. So there are two high points. And I had found early on, like, man, I had always dealt with like swelling. And part of it was I was practicing too much. But even when I kind of got away from practicing, holding the trumpet in my hand for like, upwards of 9 hours a day, which is obviously stupid. The swelling was still kind of an issue, and I got a bunch of stuff sorted out when I went to Phyllis Stork, and she really helped me with the equipment stuff, but I was still dealing with some swelling issues with with a flat rimmed, not flat meaning just like I'm not talking about like necessarily the shape of the rim, but just like we all know flat mouthpieces, they just sit on the table. And so long story short, I was introduced to the wedge mouthpiece. I'd always heard of it as being more of like a lead trumpet mouthpiece or like a jazz mouthpiece. I was in Seattle at the time. I went up and saw Dr. Dave Harrison up in Vancouver, Canada, British Columbia, and went to his basement. And I mean, the first thing he put me on was like definitely the wrong size mouthpiece, but it was like, whoa, this actually might work for me. And so since I think we spent a couple hours, we came up with a design that worked pretty well in that moment in time. And I went and played like I think I was up there like a couple days after Christmas in 2011, and I played a concert in Seattle, like New Year's Eve concert. The very next, I just put the thing in. I was like, "This is working well." I just put it in and just played this concert, and was like, "Wow, I'm not actually like swollen like at all." And I think the next week we had a Pops concert. I played on it, and I was like, "Oh wow!" Like just completely changed everything for me. Since then, I've the all of the wedge mouthpieces that I have are basically designs that he was able to take from the Phyllis Stork mouthpieces that I'd worked with her on. He copies them, puts it through the wedge sort of like algorithm, and then outcome these guys. And then we've done a few tweaks to with rim shape and like the alpha angles and that sort of thing. Nonetheless, you're talking about like energy and this sort of thing. I find that most orchestral players, they're playing on too big of equipment. And I think a lot of trumpet players are playing on sometimes too big of equipment. Like we keep thinking that like bigger is better. And I remember being on tour with the Marine Band the first tour I was on, and about I want to say like these were 49 concerts in like 52 days or something, right? And we were probably 3/4 of the way through, and I was sitting in the hotel lobby, and a buddy of mine was saying, "Man, I am like beat up," and he was kind of commenting that he wasn't, and I thought that must be nice, and so we were kind of chatting a bit, and he was asking me what I was playing. At that time I was on a Bach 1 1/4 C. It's what I'd won the audition on. It's what I played on for several years. And he was like, you might want to try one of these Hagstrom mouthpieces. It's a narrower rim but deeper cup, and so long story short, I got onto those mouthpieces, played on the Park model, and then onto the Yamaha model, and to great success. Like, and then I started to realize like, um, uh, the sound can be achieved any number of ways, right? But we tend to think like, and being trumpet players, like we end up like copying other people, as opposed to maybe necessarily just like listening to what our body needs and like what our sound needs are in general. And so I started to kind of like realize like, man, I actually need a narrower rim because that was going to give me a lot more stamina and endurance for these like marathon band concerts that we were playing. And you go to the White House and play for 3 or 4 hours. I mean, it's like I wasn't really able to convincingly do that on a 1 1/4 seat. And so over time, kind of realizing, well, the narrower rim with a shallower cup, like I was kind of bottoming out, like that wasn't really a thing. And so the Hagstrom thing of like I think it's like a 5 rim on a 1B under part. Um, like I realized like I'm able to get the sound that I want, and with the endurance and stamina that I'm looking for with a narrower rim and a deeper cup. So like I think a lot of people think like and works for them. I'm not suggesting that everybody should do this, but like a wider rim and a shallower cup work for a lot of people. It's all about face structure, right? And what the playing demands are. And so and then I finally kind of got turned on to the idea when I was in Montreal. I was Russ Devis was playing, and I mean he would like play pop shows and be screaming high on like his orchestral setup. And between him and Phyllis Stork, they did end up convincing me that it was like, if you find the right mouthpiece that really fits you, you can kind of do almost whatever you want on it. That it's a sound concept that the mouthpiece is just making it easier. That it's not the other way around of like, well, if I just play on a big mouthpiece, that will change my sound concept. And so I that was part of the thing that got me into trouble when I first went into the orchestra. It was like I just didn't have the concept in my ear yet. And so I just thought, well, if I just kind of keep playing on bigger and bigger stuff, that um, I'll get a bigger and bigger sound. And what ended up happening was I played on bigger and bigger equipment and just got more and more tired. It didn't change my concept, And so I found that it was true that for me, I need a narrower rim with a deeper cup. So I'm getting endurance, I'm getting the support of like I'm keeping my chops together, but the depth of cup is giving me the richness of sound that I'm looking for and the vibrancy. There's certainly an experimentation of like with cup depth for sort of like brilliancy, and then certainly like I'm very sensitive to like throat issues, and a little bit to backbore size. So experimenting with that will certainly help people, and I think all too often, particularly going down the orchestra route or anything, it's like you go from a 7C and then people go, yeah, we're going to work you on to this like bigger mouthpiece or whatever. And it's whatever the trumpet professor plays on. And a lot of people, whatever they're playing on is what somebody just told them to play on. And they think like, well, this is what I play on and it works for me, so it should work for you, or some variation of this type of thing. But it's just not true that like we all have different face structures. I found that like the wedge stuff works great for me because like I had braces when I was a kid, so I have like very flat teeth. And so a lot of people that have maybe a little bit of an anomaly in their tooth structure, if they haven't had braces, like we see people that, they'll move the trumpet and the mouthpiece to the side and then kind of like pivot off of that. Well, I had no pivot points. So these wedge mouthpieces kind of add a pivot point on the outside of the lips, but it acts as just a pivot point. And so these work well for me, and I think they work very well for a lot of people who have had either very flat teeth or have had braces done. But that's a very long answer to when we're looking for maximum energy, we also have to look at like how long do we need that maximum energy. So the duration of a Tchaikovsky symphony, whatever. And so if you could see all in here, I mean maybe you can see this. I mean I have probably 1 2 3 4 there are probably 10 wedge mouthpieces that I excuse me, that I use. They're all the same rim size and shape, and the only thing that changes is the cup depth and the cup shape. And so, I'm going to play one mouthpiece for a Chike 4, and I'm going to play a different mouthpiece for a Chike 1. I'm going to play a different mouthpiece to play West Side Story than I am going to play for Brahms on the rotary trumpet. So I'm not afraid of manipulating things externally as progressing through a concert. I do try to keep it as simple as possible, but in order to achieve the sound that I'm looking for, I'm also aware of, like, I don't know that one mouthpiece is always going to work, particularly when we start talking about like playing on different trumpets. But I'm always with that in mind of going, I'm trying to play with maximum allowable energy, with relentless energy, that I do rely on the gear, to help make those intentions come to fruition during rehearsals and concerts.
Oh, great. Good stuff. Good ideas. All right, we got one final segment to get through, and this is the crazy part. This is the Robinson's Remedy Rapid Fire Round, brought to us by Robinson's Remedy, rapid relief for your sore and tired chops. And it's just a series of questions that kind of go all over the place, and I just need your quickest response.
All right.
Serious. Are you ready?
I think so. I think it's 9:00 here. I've been awake for a while now, so hopefully some semblance of a sense of humor will come through, or not. We'll see.
All right, caffeine's kicked in. All right, here we go. All right, here you go. First question for you, sir. Who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
Oh, my wife, for sure.
All right.
She's the best person I know.
What is your favorite book?
Oh, gosh. I do like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Okay. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Yeah, we don't do a lot of movies. I'm trying to think here. Can I come back to that one? Maybe it is still too early. The worst movie that I've ever seen. I'm totally blanking because I have not. It has to be probably some movie that I saw in some school movie or something, right? Like the dangers of drugs, or I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. All right. If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
Bass trombone player. How about that?
Oh man, talk about
it's the same mentality, just in a different octave. No, I think I'll give you two answers. One, if I was going to stay in music, I'd probably be a bass trombone player. But I really like sports, and I think that I would really enjoy being like a strength and conditioning sport, like helping others like achieve. If I couldn't do the sport myself, like I don't really want to get hit on the football field necessarily, but like I think that I could train others. So like a sports and conditioning coach at either like a professional team or like a NCAA, like a Michigan or Ohio State thing, I think would be kind of cool.
All right, that would work. All right, what's your favorite drink?
Oh gosh, I've taken the year off of alcohol. I have not had any alcohol in all of 2022, and that will continue for another three months. Is that right? 4 months. So at the moment it's Diet Coke, but these guys have turned me on to tequila down here. So it's either some, depending on the day. But I would say honestly, my favorite drink, just day in and day out, is coming from my espresso machine here.
All right. Yeah. You're gonna have a dinner party, and you can invite any 3 people in the world, excluding like your wife, because we know she'll be there.
She'll be there.
Yeah, any 3 people in the world. Who would you want to have there?
Oh man, I think that I would enjoy having former President Obama there. I think that I would enjoy having who are some other sort of like I would want to have people that are like thought leaders, and it's not about like celebrity influence, but people who like an Elon Musk type person. although he seems maybe a little bit more celebrity these days than thought leader. But so I'm going to go with Obama. I guess we'll go with Elon Musk, and I think like even though I just can't stand politics these days, but I do think that I would want like somebody like a Gorbachev, or somebody who's like seen something from like another country that's been through things and was able to make changes. I would want to hear from people that have like made changes in people's lives, and how what their thought processes are.
Yeah, cool. All right, you got 3 additional chairs at the table. Any 3 people from history?
I was thinking history, so I think that like um like a Gandhi type person. So we'll just say Gandhi. I'm I think would be an interesting person to talk with. Um, uh, Actually, I think like a Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, but I think like a actually I think like a Martin Luther King person would be fascinating to have at the table, and I think that like I'm trying to think like of a woman that I would think that I would want like a woman's perspective in this conversation, and I'm not coming up with somebody in history that it's not coming to mind, and I apologize. So the third thing would we'll leave that chair open at the moment, but I think that we would need more than just the male perspective in this conversation. So
All right, good enough. Okay, lacquer, plated, or raw?
those are the two choices.
Lacquer, plated.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Sorry. Gosh, I have I don't have I did have a C trumpet that was raw. I don't care for the raw thing, so that's definitely not it. My B flat trumpet, the Bergeron, is lacquer plated, and I do love that sound. I think almost this is gold plated. Everything else is silver plated. So I guess we're gonna have to go with silver plated for even my rotary, my Weimar rotary, silver plated. So
All right, what is your favorite quote?
at the moment, hard work pays off.
All right, what's your greatest fear?
um, I think like probably most everybody, like the fear of embarrassment, and I won't say failure, but like the fear of failing in a way that is actually embarrassing. So I think that yeah, particularly what we do for a living and being on stage, like that threat is always seemingly always there, even though like it is rarely if ever happened, whereas like I actually embarrassed myself, but like that's a fear,
Yeah,
like of embarrassment.
yeah. It's the difference between missing a note and missing a note while you're like crapping your pants.
Yeah, I mean, I've even had situations where it's like uh you end the it's like 5-1, and you miss it, and it's like, oh my god, like I can't believe I cracked that note. That's not, it's like that happened, and you realize like in that moment it's like I don't even know if that's the definition of embarrassing. It's frustrating, and you're like, oh god, okay, but I mean, you have another shot tomorrow night or whatever, but so there's some other thing that's happening there, because like we've all missed notes, like none of us are perfect, and we've all lived to see another day, but there's something, and it's not, I know it's not just me, of like some very deep seated, like I don't want this to be an embarrassing situation. But it never, the fact of the matter is that like I don't know too many people who have been truly and fundamentally changed through like a little embarrassing situation. But we all have this fear that like something just god awful is going to happen.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
All right, next question for you. You could only have one superpower.
Uh-oh.
What would you want it to be?
Um, I like flying. I think being able to fly would be pretty cool.
All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you find to be the most overrated?
Uh, Range, like extreme high range.
All right. And what aspect do you think is the most underrated?
having a understanding of, articulation, like the fronts of notes. I think a lot of people don't grasp that the front of the note is everything, that we can show volume without actually playing loudly, just with a strong articulation. And I think a lot of people need to sort out. When I say articulation, I'm not talking about rapid, I'm talking about the actual front of the note.
Okay. You can go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Not to panic so much. I think that I assume a lot of other people felt like this, when they're in school, that it's just like you're running for your life. Like you got your lessons and everything. You're trying to please everyone all the time. At least I felt this way, trying to please lesson teachers and orchestra all the conductors that are in front of you, and just feeling like I'm never gonna make it. Like I'm running. It's not just running. I'm sprinting. From one thing to the next, and and to, if I could tell myself to, like, just keep working hard, but like don't panic. Like this hard work will pay off, and there will be mistakes, but like the sprint, you don't it was just a feeling of sprinting. So like, don't feel like you're sprinting, just do the work.
Yeah. All right, cool. And while you're back there, you're going to give your younger self one piece of advice about life.
Yeah, relax. And I have to tell myself even now, it's like I'm just kind of built to worry. So that's a constant struggle. But certainly somebody who worries about a lot of things, and even now, and I have to remind myself not to worry about things that are not in my control, and that everything is going to be okay. So just chill out.
All right. Final question for you, Chris. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, I mean, that's not for me to, dictate. Other people will all that I can do, and that is to try to, for me, try to make myself available to people through this venue, and certainly through, the variety of social media, whatever, to try to help people. I certainly feel like I have had a lot of struggles in my own playing, but have seen success, and I'm willing to share my struggles with people, and try to help them, and try to get the best out of them. I in many ways, excuse me, in many ways, I kind of feel myself a little bit more of as a coach than an actual player at times. So again, it's not really for me to decide, you know. Um, but I've always tried, even with all the I mean, I've like crossed 650 videos on YouTube of recorded etudes, and I've always tried to present those in a way of encouraging questions, encouraging people to reach out. Hardly anybody does, I can't make them, but I know that there are a lot of people out there that have a lot of questions, and I've just tried to always make myself available to help where I can.
Well, we appreciate all that you've done so far, and look forward to what you've got going on in the future. So thanks so much for taking time to hang with me today, man. This has been fantastic. I could talk with you for hours on end on some of these concepts, but we'll have to save that for another episode.
We before we started recording this, you had mentioned, you're like, well, it doesn't have to all be trumpet, and it ended up being all trumpet, and I apologize for that.
Oh, no, it's okay, but it went beyond the tucka stuff. But
yeah, no, but maybe we can do another thing, like the Saturday after Thanksgiving, when Ohio State plays Michigan State. And
I think we might have to do a live stream of
a live stream. Yeah, I'll be off. I'm actually off that Saturday, so we can do a live stream. I can, we can take everybody through our respective warm-ups and everything, and scream at the TV, and it'll be a good time.
Exactly. All right. Well, again, man, thanks. This has been absolutely fantastic, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The Hang. As always, I ask it, if you please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you want to follow Chris and his stuff, just check out the links in the show notes, and definitely go check out those videos that he's posted on his Etudes. And if you have a question, make sure you reach out to him, because he wants to answer them.
Definitely.
All right, folks, thanks again. And as always, peace and slide grease.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors, and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Gurus Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.